In the exhilarating world of sports betting, there seems to be two core schools of thought. One side, you have number crunchers with spreadsheets, often lovingly referred to as data nerds. On the other side, we have people who rely on what I call the eyeball test, watching a lot of film, breaking things down, understanding how they think the game is going to go. Now, the question is, which of these two schools of thought is going to lead to more profitable bets? Now, before we go any further, we have to talk a little bit about DraftKings Sportsbook. Sign up on DraftKings. You get $200 in bonus bets to bet on whatever you want anytime you place a $5 bet. DraftKings offers lines for pretty much every sport on the planet. Awesome same game parlay plus X tools. You have to be using them. 18 and plus in eligible states only. Call 1-800-GAMBLER if you feel like you have a gambling problem. Just go to djanalytics.net/DraftKings to grab this offer right now if you want to. You can pause the video and come back. I'll still be here. Now, in order to determine which of these two strategies is best, which one we should be using, let's take a look at the advantages and disadvantages of both. Talk a little bit about how each works and how it drives the decision making and what we actually put our money on. First, let's talk about the analytics approach. The stat nerds. A lot of people would probably call me a stat nerd. What are we doing, right? We're trying to dive into any stat we have, any analytical research, spreadsheets, Power BI, whatever we need to do, Python. Try to find an edge, right? Try to find angles, whether that's the hit rate, which is something that I hate, right? Saying that this player has gone over this point line in 8 out of 10 of their last games, whether it's an average points or, defense versus position, right? This team allows the 10th most points to point guards, so maybe this is a good look for tonight, right? Tons of advantages, also some disadvantages, right? One of the main core advantages is it's very objective, right? If we're betting on sports, we're probably sports fans, right? We probably have a favorite team, favorite players, and this can drive bias, right? You probably have seen me bet on the Pacers a lot. That's because I'm a Pacers fan. Same with the Colts. I'm a Colts fan. I have bias towards those teams, right? It doesn't mean you can't remove that bias and still be objective when you're making these bets. Like I tend to throw unders on there, right? Like I love to bet Miles Turner under on rebounds sometimes. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. But that is one core disadvantage, right? It's really hard to know and make sure we're not including any of our own personal bias in these sports bets, right? Which can be a huge problem because this is actual money we're risking, and we don't want to lose money. Another advantage is there is some predictive power, right? A lot of times historical data is going to point towards what could happen in the future, right? Hit rates and averages, things like that, they are a good indicator of what might happen in the future. There's also a risk management aspect here. The more data we have to support our bets, the lower the risk is. At the end of the day, we are still risking actual money on these bets, so there's always risk. It's gambling. It's called gambling for a reason. But I do feel like the analytical stats-based approach can help lower that risk because, again, you have all of this research, all of this these metrics and statistics that can point towards what's going to happen in the future. Obviously, there are disadvantages here, right? The largest disadvantage in being a stats nerd, right, and not necessarily relying on what your eyes tell you, is there's no human element, right? At the end of the day, these are human beings playing these sports that we're betting on, and only using data, only using statistics to bet on them removes that from our side of the equation, right? Which can be a huge problem. It's a huge disadvantage to only using data and only using stats to place your bets. Another disadvantage here is how dynamic the world of sports can be, right? Sports at the end of the day can be very unpredictable. You never know what's going on in one player's life or home life or who had a hard travel day or something like that, right? Which can really cause anything to happen. There's not really a way that we can predict that with data. We can't really predict, this player had a fight with their wife last night and they're not feeling like themselves today. That's really hard to predict, right? We can't predict, this player's lactose intolerant and maybe accidentally had cheese for lunch. Who knows, right? So there's always a human element. There's a dynamic nature in the world of sports because, again, these are human beings playing these games that we're betting on. Now let's talk about what I like to call the eyeball test. There are so many guys that are very successful in this world that watch hours and hours of film. Watch every NBA game that happens. Kind of break down how they see each game going. What each team wants to do on offense, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to prevent on defense. And make their bets from there, right? Which I think is a great strategy. It also has advantages and disadvantages, right? One of the main advantages is the nuance understanding, right? You're going to be able to capture and you're going to be able to see things that we just talked about that the data might miss, that data and statistics has no indicator of, right? Player effort, right? Sometimes this player, for whatever reason, doesn't try as hard. It's 82 games in an NBA season, and that's bound to happen. Team dynamics is another one, right? Look at the Philadelphia 76ers, who are having an outstanding start of the season after getting rid of James Harden, right? Not saying that's, he's a good or a bad basketball player. It's not what this video is about. But team dynamics has a huge implication on the box scores every night of every player, right? Look at what Tyrese Maxey is doing on a team that last year looked like they were a little discombobulated at times, right? The eyeball test is also very adaptable, right? Especially in terms of like live betting, being able to watch a game live, understanding what's happening, understanding, hey, this person is probably going to be in foul trouble, right? Just because the way they're playing defense and what the other team is trying to do offensively. Maybe that's a spot to look for an under on this player's points, rebounds, whatever it might be. Also, there's obviously disadvantages. Kind of the exact opposite of the data approach, right? There absolutely can be bias that comes into play here, right? If you're a fan of one team, or you like this player on a team that might not be your favorite team, right? You're probably going to have some bias and feel like there's some value in their lines to the over when there might not be, right? It's just how you feel about that player, how you feel about this team. It also can be inconsistent, right? It relies heavily on individual interpretation of all of these games going on. And, what you see in a game one night might not be the same things that you're seeing the next night. It's really hard to watch that many hours of sports and kind of keep the same process and the same things that you're looking for and things that are sticking out to you, right? Because there's a huge human element in this, and humans make mistakes. Now let's try to compare the two and talk about which one is better. I see so much on Twitter and on all the social medias of, oh, you're just a data nerd. You don't know basketball, or on the flip side, why did you make that? But that was such a bad bet. If you look at this stat, that makes no sense, right? And I'm like, guys, it doesn't have to be one side versus the other, right? You don't have to just be somebody who only uses data, only uses stats. You don't have to be someone who only watches film and tries to understand the game better and doesn't look at stats, right? I think that's the wrong way of going about this, right? It doesn't matter which process is better, which mindset is better, because in my opinion, to be successful and be profitable long term in gambling on sports, you have to use both, right? If you're only looking at spreadsheets and numbers, but you're not really watching these sports that you're betting on, it's going to be really hard for you to make money. On the flip side, if you're only watching all the film and not really looking at any stats and data and all of that, it's also going to be really hard for you to be profitable long term. There has to be a mixing and a balance, right? And we have to stop this, one side versus the other. That data people can't understand basketball. People who like to talk about stats and data and analytics, they can't understand the game of baseball or football, right? There has to be a balance here, and we have to use both. Let's take a look at some examples, right? Miles Turner recently, last couple of games, has not been rebounding the ball very well, right? So you might look at when the Pacers play next, you might see a line of 6.5 rebounds for Miles Turner. You think, oh no, there's no way he's going to go over, right? There's no way he's gonna get 7 rebounds. Look what he's done in the last 2 games. That's what a purely analytical, purely stats-based approach would say, right? But when we watch those games and try to understand what was happening and why those stats were so low for Miles Turner, well, last 2 games he played against Joel Embiid, and he was in foul trouble basically the whole time, right? He's sitting on the bench a lot. You can't rebound from the bench. And when he was out there, Joel Embiid obviously is a great rebounder, probably a better rebounder than Miles Turner. Not probably, I think that's just a fact. Joel Embiid is better at rebounding basketballs and pretty much everything than Miles Turner. So we can't look at this and say Miles Turner is a bad rebounder, right? And we should always take his under on rebounds. That's not the case, right? Miles Turner is a very solid rebounder. He's just not as good as Joel Embiid, and when he's not on the court because he's in foul trouble, he can't rebound the basketball. That's something you're not really going to know if you're only looking at box scores, you're only looking at data. Now let's look at the flip side, and let's look at the Cleveland Cavaliers. Evan Mobley is a very good rebounder, right? Somebody who I love to bet on because he's a very talented, very skilled big man. Now, when I posted that, and this bet did miss, in interest of full transparency, this bet did not make me money. But I posted I posted a bet on Twitter saying, that Evan Mobley's rebound line was too low a couple weeks ago, and everybody kind of ran and a lot of eyeball test people and their replies saying, oh, Jared Allen is back, right? That line can't be too low for Evan Mobley rebounds when Jared Allen is also out there. But when we dig into the numbers, right, and shout out to addmorefunds.com and their on-off tool, we can see that Evan Mobley is pretty much the same rebounder when Jared Allen is on the floor as when he's off, right? His numbers, is the number of rebounds per 100 possessions are very, very similar when he's on the court versus when Jared Allen is off the court. Evan Mobley's line is 9.5 in tonight's game. We're recording this on November 15th when the Cavaliers play the Portland Trailblazers. That is a line that he has hit, half the time or so when Jared Allen has played this season. So again, we have to mix both concepts. We have to be able to balance the two methodologies and the way that we analyze these games to be successful in the long term. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Which strategy do you use primarily? Are you using both today? How can we get better at this? How can we evolve this? And how can we win more money? Be nice to each other. I've been DJ and Eli on Twitter. Throw me a follow. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. So that's just an example of the eyeball test saying this is a bad bet. But the data does say that, it might be a good one.